The morning sun streamed through the massive windows of Denver International Airport as Tanya Williams wheeled her small carry-on suitcase toward the security checkpoint. She had arrived 3 hours early, determined to make absolutely sure nothing would go wrong. This wasn't just any trip. This was the beginning of something huge for her. At 19 years old, Tanya was the first person in her family to attend college. Now halfway through her sophomore year, she'd accomplished something even more remarkable. She'd been selected for a prestigious internship program with the CIA in Washington, D.C. Her mother had cried when she got the news. Her father had taken the whole family out for dinner at their favorite restaurant, something they rarely could afford to do. "Just don't forget about us when you're running the world," her little brother had joked, but the pride in his eyes was real. Tanya had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Her documents were perfectly organized in a folder her professor had given her as a congratulatory gift. Her clothes were carefully packed, professional but not flashy. She'd even practiced answering questions that might come up during orientation. Nothing was going to mess this up. She joined the security line, patiently waiting her turn. When she reached the front, she handed her ID and boarding pass to the TSA agent with a smile. Officer James Reeves didn't return the smile. His face remained stone cold as he studied her documents, then looked at her, then back at the documents. Something in his expression made Tanya's stomach tighten. "Is something wrong?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Step aside, please," Officer Reeves said, his tone flat. "There's an irregularity with your documentation." Tanya blinked in confusion. "An irregularity? What kind of irregularity?" "Step aside," he repeated, louder this time. People in nearby lines turned to look. Secondary screening area. Heat rose to Tanya's cheeks as she was directed to a small area off to the side. This had to be some kind of mistake. Her ID was valid. Her boarding pass had been issued without any problems. She'd triple-checked everything. "Excuse me," she said as Officer Reeves began to walk away. "Can you please tell me what the problem is? My flight is in 3 hours, but I need to be at orientation." "You'll need to wait," he cut her off. "Someone will be with you shortly." And with that, he returned to his post, leaving Tanya standing alone with her suitcase. The minutes ticked by slowly. 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Tanya watched as other travelers moved through the checkpoint without issue. She noticed something that made her heart sink even further. Several people who had arrived after her, including businessmen who seemed in a rush, were being processed quickly. One man had even argued about having to remove his shoes. But Officer Reeves had processed him with nothing more than a stern word. 30 minutes became 45. Tanya approached another TSA agent nearby. "Excuse me, I've been waiting for almost an hour now. Officer Reeves said there was an issue with my documentation, but no one has told me what the problem is." The agent glanced at Officer Reeves, who was watching them. "You'll need to continue waiting. It's procedure." "But what procedure?" Tanya pressed, fighting to keep her voice level. "I'm going to miss my flight to Washington. This is really important." The agent's expression softened slightly. "I understand, but I can't override another officer's decision. You'll have to wait." As the clock approached the 1-hour mark, panic began to set in. Tanya had planned for delays, but not this kind. She pulled out her phone and found the contact information for her program coordinator at the CIA, a woman named Li Chen. Her finger hovered over the number. Would calling make things worse? What if they thought she couldn't handle a simple travel issue? But as she watched Officer Reeves wave through yet another traveler with barely a glance at their documents, something hardened inside her. This wasn't right. She dialed the number. "Hello, this is Li Chen." "Ms. Chen, this is Tanya Williams. I'm supposed to be starting the internship program today, but I'm stuck at Denver Airport security. They've held me here for almost an hour saying, 'There's an issue with my documentation, but no one will tell me what's wrong.'" There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "Which airline and terminal are you at, Tanya?" Lee's voice had changed, becoming crisp and professional. Tanya provided the details, including Officer Reeves's name and badge number, which was visible on his uniform. "Stay calm. Don't engage in any arguments. I'm going to make some calls right now. Don't worry about being late. Just focus on getting through security. I'll call you back in a few minutes. After hanging up, Tanya felt slightly better, though the knot in her stomach remained. She watched the second hand on the large airport clock continue its relentless circle. 8 minutes. That's how long it took before everything changed. A tall man in a crisp suit strode purposefully toward the checkpoint, flanked by 2 colleagues. His badge identified him as Regional Security Director Michael Torres. The entire atmosphere of the checkpoint shifted as he approached. Several TSA agents straightened their postures. Officer Reeves, who had been leaning against his podium, suddenly stood at attention. Director Torres spoke briefly to the checkpoint supervisor before making a beeline for Tanya. His expression was professionally neutral, but his eyes were kind. "Ms. Williams? I'm Director Torres. I understand you've been experiencing some difficulties this morning." Director Torres extended his hand to Tanya, who shook it with a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. The sudden shift in atmosphere was almost dizzying. Just moments ago, she had been invisible. Now she was the center of attention. "Let me see your documentation, please," Torres said, his voice calm but authoritative. Tanya handed over her folder with trembling fingers. The director opened it, reviewing each document methodically while his colleagues stood nearby. Officer Reeves had moved closer, his posture rigid. "Everything appears to be in perfect order," Torres announced after a brief review. He looked directly at Officer Reeves. "Can you explain why Ms. Williams has been detained for over an hour?" Reeves cleared his throat. "Standard security protocols, sir. The system flagged her documentation for additional verification." Torres raised an eyebrow. "Which specific protocol are you referring to, officer? And what specific flag appeared in the system?" The silence that followed was telling. Reeves shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "I was following procedure," he finally said, his voice lower now. "Better safe than sorry in these times." Torres turned back to Tanya. "Ms. Williams, how long have you been waiting here?" "About an hour and 15 minutes now," she replied, glancing at the clock. "My flight is still 2 hours away, but I was hoping to get settled at the gate and review my orientation materials." Torres nodded, then turned to one of his colleagues. "Please escort Ms. Williams through security immediately." To Tanya, he added, "We'll make sure you reach your gate with plenty of time." Officer Reeves stepped forward. "Sir, with all due respect, I haven't completed the screening process. I'm completing it." Torres cut him off. "Ms. Williams's documentation is legitimate and complete. There is no reason for further delay." His tone left no room for argument. One of Torres's colleagues began guiding Tanya toward the front of the line. Torres spoke quietly to Officer Reeves. Though Tanya couldn't hear the words, the officer's face grew increasingly flushed. The female agent helping Tanya, her badge, Red Officer Rivera, offered a small smile. "Sorry about all this. Let's get you through quickly." The same security checkpoint that had been an impassable barrier just minutes ago now seemed to open effortlessly. Officer Rivera guided Tanya through with professional efficiency, ensuring her belongings were screened properly but without unnecessary delay. "What just happened?" Tanya asked as she collected her belongings on the other side. The whole experience felt surreal. Officer Rivera hesitated before answering. "Let's just say that when certain agencies call, people listen." She nodded toward Tanya's folder. "That internship you're heading to? It carries weight." Tanya's phone buzzed with a text from Li Chen. "All clear? Call me when you're through security." As they walked toward the terminal, Tanya noticed Director Torres had finished with Officer Reeves and was now on the phone, his expression serious. Reeves had been directed to a small office area off the main concourse. "Will he get in trouble?" Tanya asked, surprised by her own question. After all that had happened, she shouldn't care about Officer Reeves's fate. Officer Rivera considered her response carefully. "There will be a review. The truth is, we take these matters very seriously. If procedures weren't followed correctly, or if personal bias played a role in your detention, there will be consequences." They reached the entrance to the main terminal, bustling with travelers rushing to catch flights or find coffee. "You're all set," Officer Rivera said. "Your gate is B27, About a 10-minute walk that way. She pointed down the concourse. And Ms. Williams, for what it's worth, congratulations on your internship. That's quite an achievement. Tanya thanked her and started toward her gate, pulling her suitcase behind her. The wheels clicked rhythmically against the floor tiles as she walked, giving her a steady beat to organize her thoughts. She found a quiet corner near her gate and called Li Chen. I'm through security, Tanya said. Thank you for your help. I don't know what you did, but it worked incredibly fast. Are you okay? Li asked, concern evident in her voice. I'm fine, just a bit shaken. Tanya watched the airport staff preparing for boarding at a nearby gate. I've never experienced anything like that before. Unfortunately, these things happen, Li replied, her tone measured. But they shouldn't. And that's partly why programs like ours exist, to bring diverse perspectives into government agencies. The system only gets better when people with different experiences are part of it. Tanya considered this. I almost didn't call you. I was worried it would look bad, like I couldn't handle a simple problem on my own. That's exactly why you should have called, Li said firmly. Knowing when to reach out for help is a strength, not a weakness. In your future career, you'll be part of a team. No one succeeds alone. The conversation left Tanya feeling steadier, more confident. As she settled into a seat to wait for her flight, she received another text, this time from Director Torres. Ms. Williams, I want to personally apologize for your experience today. Please know that we're taking this incident seriously. If you're willing, I'd appreciate the opportunity to speak with you in more detail when you return to Denver. Safe travels. She stared at her phone, unsure how to respond. Part of her wanted to put the whole incident behind her, to focus only on the exciting opportunity ahead. But another part recognized that staying silent wouldn't help the next person who might find themselves in a similar situation. Nearby, a family with young children settled into their seats. The mother was expertly managing both kids and carry-ons, while the father returned from a nearby shop with snacks. The normality of the scene struck Tanya, how everyday this was for them, how free from worry they seemed about making it through security. Tanya thought about her own family, about her little brother who would be traveling on his own in a few years. She thought about her classmates, her future colleagues. Then she typed her reply to Director Torres. Thank you for stepping in today. I would be willing to discuss this further when I return. I believe it's important. As she hit send, the gate agent announced pre-boarding for her flight. Tanya gathered her belongings, tucked her phone away, and stood up. Whatever had happened in those tense minutes at security, she wouldn't let it define her day or her future. She had worked too hard to get here. With her head held high, she joined the boarding line, ready to take the next step in her journey. The flight from Denver to Washington, D.C. gave Tanya plenty of time to think. As the plane soared above the patchwork landscape of America, she replayed the morning's events in her mind. The confusion, the frustration, the helplessness, and then the sudden appearance of Director Torres that changed everything. She pulled out her orientation packet and tried to focus on the materials, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the airport. What would have happened if she hadn't called? Li? Would she have missed her flight? Would anyone have stepped in to help her? The plane touched down at Reagan National Airport with a gentle bump. As passengers began collecting their belongings, Tanya's phone buzzed with a message from Li. Car, waiting for you at arrivals. Driver has a sign with your name. True to Li's word, a professional-looking driver stood in the arrivals area holding a small sign with T. Williams printed on it. After introducing herself, Tanya was escorted to a sleek black car. First time in D.C.? The driver asked as they pulled away from the curb. Yes, Tanya replied, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. First time anywhere east of Chicago, actually. Well, you picked a good reason to visit, the driver said with a smile in the rearview mirror. That program you're in, it's a big deal. Been driving for the agency for 15 years. Seen a lot of bright young folks come through. Many of them are running departments now. The drive took them past iconic monuments and buildings that Tanya had only seen in pictures or on TV. Despite her exhaustion and the lingering stress from the morning, She couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement. She was really here. The car pulled up to a modern building in a quiet part of the city. "This is the residence hall for interns," the driver explained. "Your orientation starts tomorrow morning at headquarters. Another car will pick you up at 7 a.m. sharp." Inside the residence hall, Tanya was greeted by a friendly staff member who provided her key card and basic information about the facilities. "You have a single room on the 3rd floor. The common areas are open until midnight. There's a group of interns having dinner in the lounge if you'd like to join them." Tanya thanked her and headed upstairs to find her room. It was small but comfortable, a single bed, desk, closet, and a private bathroom. She unpacked quickly, freshened up, and decided to join the other interns. After the day she'd had, some normal conversation would be welcome. In the lounge, about a dozen young people were gathered around a large table filled with pizza boxes and soda cans. They looked up as she entered, and a friendly-looking young man waved her over. "You must be Tanya," he said. "Lee told us you might be joining late. I'm Alex. This is Priya, Damon, Hannah, and everyone else." He gestured around the table. "We're all trying to remember each other's names, so don't worry if you forget." Tanya settled into an empty chair, gratefully accepting a slice of pizza. The conversation flowed easily as everyone shared their backgrounds and how they'd ended up in the program. "So, what held you up?" Damon asked Tanya between bites. "Lee mentioned there was some issue at the airport." Tanya hesitated, unsure how much to share. "Just some confusion with security," she said finally. "Nothing too exciting." Priya, a sharp-eyed young woman with long dark hair, gave her a knowing look. "TSA problems? Been there. My record is 2 hours in secondary screening. Because my name matched someone on a list, not even the same person, just the same name. That's awful," Tanya said, surprised by the casual way Priya spoke about it. Priya shrugged. "Welcome to traveling while brown, or black, or having a name that sounds foreign. You learn to arrive extra early." Others around the table nodded, sharing similar experiences. Tanya was struck by how matter-of-fact they all were, as if this was simply an expected part of life. "But that's part of why we're here, right?" Alex chimed in. "To change things from the inside. You can't fix what you're not part of." The conversation shifted to excitement about tomorrow's orientation, speculation about their different assignments, and recommendations for must-see places in D.C. By the time Tanya returned to her room, she felt more settled, more determined. Her phone showed a missed call from her mom. It was late, but Tanya knew her mother would be waiting up for news. "Hi, Mom. Sorry I didn't call earlier. It's been a long day. Tanya Williams, you had me worried sick. Your father and I have been checking the flight status online. Did everything go okay?" Tanya paused, considering whether to tell her parents about what happened at the airport. They would be upset, might even want her to come home. And what good would it do? It was over now. "Everything's fine, Mom. Just a busy day." She described the residence hall, the other interns, the glimpses she'd caught of famous landmarks. "It's pretty amazing here." After promising to call again, tomorrow, Tanya hung up and prepared for bed. She had almost dozed off when her phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Lee Chen. "Tanya, I hope you're settled in comfortably. I wanted to let you know that Director Torres called me. This afternoon, there will be a formal investigation into the incident at Denver International. He asked if you would be willing to provide a statement. This is entirely your choice, and it won't affect your position in the program either way. We can discuss it more tomorrow if you'd like. Get some rest, big day ahead." Tanya stared at the ceiling, turning over the email in her mind. A formal investigation. That meant Officer Reeves would be questioned, possibly disciplined. Records would be pulled, patterns examined. She thought about what Priya had said so casually. "Welcome to traveling while brown, or black." And Alex's response? "You can't fix what you're not part of." Tomorrow, she would step into CIA headquarters, for the first time. She would begin learning how complex systems worked from the inside. And maybe, just maybe, her experience could help change how those systems operated. With that thought, Tanya finally drifted off to sleep, the unfamiliar sounds of the city creating a strange lullaby outside her window. Morning came quickly. Tanya woke to her alarm, showered, and dressed in her most professional outfit. Dark slacks, a crisp white blouse, and the navy blazer her grandmother had helped her buy for important occasions. As promised, a car was waiting outside the residence hall at exactly 7 a.m. This time there were 3 other interns inside: Priya, Alex, and a quiet guy named Takeo who had arrived after dinner last night. "Ready for day 1?" Alex asked cheerfully. "I barely slept. Too excited." Priya rolled her eyes. "I don't understand morning people. It should be illegal to be that happy before coffee." Their easy banter helped calm Tanya's nerves as the car approached a security checkpoint. Given yesterday's experience, she felt her pulse quicken as a uniformed guard approached their vehicle. But this time was different. The driver presented credentials, their names were checked against a list, and they were waved through efficiently and professionally. The building they pulled up to wasn't what Tanya had expected. No giant sign announcing CIA headquarters. No obvious security features that screamed top secret. Just a modern office building that could have housed anything, from attorneys to tech startups. Inside, however, the security was evident. They were each photographed, fingerprinted, and issued temporary badges that had to be visible at all times. "Ms. Williams?" A staff member approached as they completed the process. "Ms. Chen would like to see you before the general orientation. If you'll follow me, please." Tanya glanced at her new friends who gave her encouraging nods as she was led down a hallway to a small, comfortable office where Li Chen was waiting. Li Chen stood up from behind her desk as Tanya entered the office. She was shorter than Tanya had imagined from their phone conversations, maybe 5'2", but there was something in her stance that commanded respect. Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. "It's good to finally meet you in person, Tanya," she said, gesturing to a chair. "Please have a seat. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "I'm fine, thank you," Tanya replied, trying to hide her nervousness. The office was small but elegant, with a window overlooking a courtyard. Several framed certificates hung on the wall, along with what looked like a group photo from some kind of training exercise. Lee sat down across from her. "Before we join the others for orientation, I wanted to check in with you personally about yesterday's incident. How are you feeling?" The simple question caught Tanya off guard. She had prepared herself for questions about what happened, about details and timelines, not about her feelings. "I'm okay," she said slowly. It was frustrating and confusing, and a little scary if I'm being honest, but I'm here now, so it worked out. Lee nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That's understandable. These situations can be more upsetting than we sometimes realize." She paused. "I received a call from Director Torres this morning. The airport security footage has been reviewed." Tanya shifted in her seat. "Already? That was fast." "Some matters warrant immediate attention," Lee replied. "The footage confirmed your account completely. It also showed something else." She opened a folder on her desk. "Officer Reeves processed 27 travelers in the hour before you arrived. 7 of those travelers had documentation that warranted additional verification according to standard protocols. Expired IDs that needed supervisor clearance, boarding passes with name mismatches, that sort of thing. All 7 were cleared within 3 to 5 minutes. She looked up at Tanya. "You were the only traveler who was detained for more than 10 minutes. You were also the only black female traveler he processed during that period." Tanya absorbed this information silently. Part of her had wondered if she'd overreacted, if perhaps there had been some legitimate reason for her detention that she simply didn't understand. "There's more," Lee continued. "Director Torres pulled Officer Reeves's record for the past 6 months. There's a clear pattern of disproportionate scrutiny toward young minority travelers, particularly women. In most cases, the delays were short enough that formal complaints weren't filed. But the pattern is unmistakable when viewed as a whole." "What happens now?" Tanya asked quietly. "That depends partly on you," Lee said, placing a form on the desk between them. "This is a formal statement form. If you're willing to provide your account of what happened, it would strengthen the case significantly. However, she added, her tone serious, this is completely voluntary and has no bearing whatsoever on your position in this program. Tanya stared at the form, thoughts racing. If I fill this out, what happens to Officer Reeves? Lee considered her response carefully. Based on the evidence already gathered, he'll likely face disciplinary action regardless. With your statement, it could lead to termination or reassignment to a non-public-facing role. More importantly, it could prompt a wider review of practices at that checkpoint, potentially affecting how training is conducted. And if I don't fill it out? The investigation continues, but with less personal testimony to support the case. Some form of disciplinary action would still be likely, but perhaps less severe. Tanya thought about her conversation with the other interns last night about Priya's casual acceptance of extra screening as an inevitable part of life. She thought about her little brother who would be traveling on his own soon, about all the people who didn't have someone to call when they were stuck at security. She reached for a pen. I'll fill it out. Lee nodded, respect evident in her eyes. Take your time. I'll step out for a few minutes to give you some privacy. Alone in the office, Tanya carefully documented everything she could remember. The time she arrived, Officer Reeves's exact words, how long she waited, the different treatment she observed. When she finished, she felt oddly lighter, as if setting down a heavy bag she'd been carrying. Lee returned and accepted the completed form with a nod of thanks. The general orientation starts in 15 minutes, but first there's someone who'd like to speak with you. She pressed a button on her desk. Phone. Moments later, the door opened, and a distinguished-looking man in his 60s entered the room. Lee stood immediately. Deputy Director Wilson, thank you for making time in your schedule, she said formally, then turned to Tanya. Ms. Williams, this is Deputy Director Thomas Wilson. Tanya scrambled to her feet, stunned. The Deputy Director of the CIA wanted to speak with her? On her first day? Ms. Williams, he said, shaking her hand. I've heard a great deal about you. Your academic record is exceptional, and your professors speak very highly of your analytical skills. Thank you, sir, Tanya managed, trying to keep her voice steady. Please, sit down, he said, taking a seat himself. I won't keep you long. I just wanted to personally welcome you to the program and express my regret about your experience yesterday. Thank you, Tanya said again, unsure what else to add. I also wanted to tell you a story, Wilson continued, his manner relaxing slightly. 35 years ago, I was a young man trying to make my way through a very different CIA than the one you're entering today. I was one of only a handful of black employees in my division. On my third day, I was stopped by security while trying to enter a building where I had a meeting. Despite having all the proper credentials, I was detained for over 2 hours while they verified my clearance. He paused, a shadow crossing his face at the memory. By the time I was cleared, I had missed the meeting, an important one that could have advanced my career significantly. I was angry, embarrassed, and seriously considered quitting. What did you do? Tanya asked, drawn into his story. I filed a complaint, he said simply. Not because I thought it would change anything for me personally, but because I hoped it might make things easier for the next person who looked like me. And then I put my head down and worked twice as hard as everyone else. He leaned forward slightly. Ms. Williams, what happened to you shouldn't have happened, full stop. But I believe that these agencies, all of them, from the TSA to the CIA, need people like you. People who have experienced the flaws in the system firsthand and are committed to making it better. Tanya nodded, a lump forming in her throat. Your internship assignment, Wilson continued, glancing at Lee. Ms. Chen tells me you were slated for the Data Analysis Division? Yes, sir, Tanya confirmed. With your permission, I'd like to add a secondary project to your workload. We're developing new training modules for security personnel across multiple agencies, focusing on eliminating bias in screening procedures. Your perspective would be invaluable. Tanya blinked in surprise. I would be honored, sir. Excellent, Wilson said, standing. Ms. Chen will provide the details. I look forward to seeing what you accomplish during your time with us. He shook her hand again and left the office. For a moment, Tanya sat in silence, processing what had just happened. Lee gave her a small smile. Ready to join the others for orientation? Tanya nodded, gathering her composure. Yes, definitely. They walked together through the hallways, passing security checkpoints where officers nodded respectfully at Lee's badge. Other interns were already filing into a large conference room. You made quite an impression, Lee said quietly as they approached the room. Deputy Director Wilson doesn't personally welcome interns. Ever. No pressure. Tanya joked weakly. Lee stopped, turning to face her directly. Tanya, what happened yesterday was wrong. But sometimes the wrong things lead us exactly where we need to be. That form you filled out? It won't just affect one officer or one airport. It's going to be part of something much bigger. The training modules? Tanya guessed. That and more, Lee confirmed. Change happens slowly in government agencies, but it does happen, especially when the right people push for it. She nodded toward the conference room door. Now, let's go meet your fellow agents in training. Tanya straightened her shoulders and followed Lee into the room, where 24 eager faces turned to watch her enter. Alex caught her eye and gave her a subtle thumbs up. Priya saved her a seat. As Tanya settled in beside her new colleagues, she couldn't help but feel that something significant had shifted. Yesterday she had been powerless, just a girl stuck at an airport checkpoint. Today somehow she had been given a voice that might actually make a difference. The orientation began with a senior officer welcoming them to what he called the most important internship of your lives. Tanya opened her notebook and began taking notes, already thinking about how she could contribute to those training modules. Maybe her airport experience had happened for a reason after all. 1 year later, the sun shone brightly as Tanya wheeled her carry-on through the familiar corridors of Denver International Airport. Unlike her first journey through this space, today she moved with confidence, her temporary CIA badge tucked neatly in her jacket pocket. After completing her internship with outstanding evaluations, she had been offered a junior analyst position, a rare achievement for someone still completing their degree. Today's trip was special. She wasn't heading to Washington for work, but was instead returning from a quick visit home to see her family, and she had an important meeting scheduled in just 30 minutes. As she approached the security area, memories of that day 1 year ago flooded back. The helplessness, the confusion, the anger. She took a deep breath and continued forward, scanning the checkpoint for a familiar face. Ms. Williams. The deep voice came from behind her. She turned to see Director Torres looking much the same as he had that day, professional, authoritative, but with kind eyes. Director Torres, she said, extending her hand. Thank you for making time to meet. Of course. He gestured toward a small coffee shop near the security area. Shall we? They sat at a corner table with their coffees, away from the bustling crowd of travelers. Torres seemed genuinely interested in hearing about her experience in the internship program, asking thoughtful questions about her projects and the people she'd worked with. Li Chen speaks very highly of you, he said. She mentioned you were instrumental in developing the new screening training modules. Tanya nodded, feeling a touch of pride. It was a team effort, but yes, I contributed to the bias recognition and intervention sections. Those sections have received the highest ratings from trainees, Torres said. Real-world examples make all the difference. A moment of comfortable silence passed between them as they sipped their coffee. Then Torres set his cup down decisively. I wanted to meet with you in person for 2 reasons, he said. First, to update you on the changes implemented since last year. And second, because I believe you deserve to know what happened with Officer Reeves. Tanya straightened in her chair. In the whirlwind of her internship and new job, she had almost forgotten about the officer who had detained her. Almost. Following the investigation, which your statement greatly helped with, Officer Reeves was removed from passenger screening duties, Torres explained. He was offered retraining or an administrative position. He chose to resign instead. Tanya absorbed this information, surprised by the complex emotions it stirred. Relief, yes, but not the satisfaction she might have expected. I don't take any pleasure in someone losing their job, she said quietly. Torres nodded. That speaks to your character, but this was never about one officer. It was about identifying and addressing a systemic issue. He pulled a tablet from his briefcase and showed her a series of charts and graphs. These are the screening metrics for this checkpoint over the past year. Look at the secondary screening rates by demographic. Tanya studied the data, her analyst training kicking in automatically. The disparities that had been evident a year ago had decreased dramatically. Not eliminated entirely, that would take more time, but the improvement was undeniable. We implemented the new training program here first, as a pilot, Torres explained. Every officer underwent the modules your team developed. We paired that with new oversight protocols and regular data reviews. He swiped to another screen. The result? Passenger complaints down 40%, security effectiveness maintained at previous levels, and processing times actually improved by 7%. Overall, that's impressive, Tanya said, genuinely surprised by the scope of the changes. This pilot program is now being rolled out nationally, Torres continued, starting with the busiest airports first, then expanding to all TSA checkpoints over the next 2 years. He put the tablet away and looked at her directly. Ms. Williams, what happened to you that day was wrong. But your response to it, your willingness to speak up, to document what happened, and then to channel that experience into constructive change, that's extraordinary. Tanya felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected praise. I just did what seemed right. That's exactly what makes it extraordinary, Torres said with a small smile. Most people either accept the injustice or fight against it with anger. Few have the vision to transform it into something better. Their conversation was interrupted by an announcement over the airport speakers. Torres glanced at his watch. I have another meeting across the terminal, he said, gathering his things. But there's one more thing I wanted to tell you. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a glossy brochure, sliding it across the table to her. It featured a diverse group of young professionals on the cover. The Homeland Security Leadership Academy, Torres explained. It's a selective program that fast-tracks promising young professionals for leadership positions across all the agencies. TSA, CIA, FBI, Border Patrol, all of them. Deputy Director Wilson suggested I bring this to your attention. The next application cycle opens in 6 months. Tanya picked up the brochure, scanning the requirements. It was highly competitive, typically requiring years more experience than she had. I'm not sure I'd qualify yet. Special recommendations can override the standard requirements in exceptional cases, Torres said meaningfully. Just something to consider for your future. He stood and offered his hand. It was good to see you again, Ms. Williams. Safe travels back to Washington. As he walked away, Tanya remained at the table, turning the brochure over in her hands. Leadership positions, the ability to shape policy, to influence training, to make real changes from within. It was more than she had ever imagined for herself. When she'd applied to the internship program, her phone buzzed with a text from Priya. Flight landed yet? Don't forget dinner tonight with the crew. Alex is cooking, so bring backup snacks. Tanya smiled. The friends she'd made during her internship had all found positions in various agencies, but they still made time to get together regularly. They jokingly called themselves the reformers, young professionals determined to change the system from the inside out. She tucked the brochure into her bag and headed toward security. As she approached the checkpoint, she noticed a young black girl, perhaps 17 or 18, looking nervous as she gathered her documents. There was something in her posture that Tanya recognized. The slightly defensive stance, the worry about what might go wrong. Without thinking, Tanya moved to stand behind her in line. First time flying? She asked casually. The girl looked up, in surprise. Is it that obvious? A little, Tanya said with a smile. I remember my first time. It can be intimidating. I'm going to visit colleges, the girl explained. First one in my family to go if I get accepted. That's amazing, Tanya said. I was too. It's a big deal. The girl nodded, still looking at the security line with apprehension. It helps to have everything ready. Tanya offered, pointing to the girl's documents. ID and boarding pass in hand, shoes easy to slip off, no metal if possible. And remember, you have every right to be here. You belong in that line just as much as anyone else. The girl gave her a curious look, then smiled. Thanks for the tips. They moved forward in line together. When they reached the front, Tanya was pleased to see a face she recognized, Officer Rivera, who had helped her that day a year ago. Ms. Williams, Rivera said with a nod of recognition. Good to see you again. You too, Officer Rivera. Rivera checked the girl's documentation efficiently and respectfully, explaining each step of the process. You're all set, she told her. Have a great trip visiting colleges. The girl looked back at Tanya with surprise and relief as she moved through to the checkpoint. Tanya gave her an encouraging nod. As Tanya handed over her own documents, Rivera spoke quietly. You know those training modules you helped develop? They're making a difference. Real change happens slowly, but it is happening. I'm glad to hear it, Tanya replied sincerely. She made her way through security without incident and headed toward her gate. As she walked, she pulled out her phone and opened the brochure Torres had given her, taking a picture to send to her parents. They had always believed in her, even when she hadn't fully believed in herself. Something to think about for the future, she typed beneath the image. Turns out that bad day at the airport led to some pretty amazing things. As she hit send, she caught sight of the young girl from security, now confidently making her way to her own gate. Tanya smiled to herself. Sometimes the most important changes weren't the big policy shifts or the training programs. Sometimes they were the small moments of connection that helped one person feel less alone, less afraid. She slipped her phone into her pocket and continued toward her gate, already thinking about the leadership application and what she might be able to accomplish with that level of influence. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. Change never was. But for the first time, she could clearly see how her own difficult experience had created opportunities, not just for herself, but for others, like her. And that, Tanya realized, was worth every minute of the struggle.